Hello, and welcome to this week's war activity. This week we're going to be covering abbreviations. Abbreviations are important to be used properly in your APA style writing. We want to use them sparingly, as noted here in this general rule. Some papers do overuse abbreviations, and you might have found when you're reading your articles that can be a little bit confusing. You kind of have to keep looking back to see, what does this abbreviation mean? So you want to use them sparingly. Sometimes journals will encourage authors to use abbreviations to shorten the amount of text that the paper takes up. But we don't have to worry about that here in this class. We want to learn to write the correct way. Now, I'm going to show you in the APA style guides how when you first use an abbreviation, you present the full term written out and the abbreviation goes in parentheses. Now, it's also important to note that you don't want to use that, or you don't need to show that abbreviation unless you're going to use that abbreviated term at least 3 more times. You don't need to define abbreviations that are presented in a dictionary, units of measurement, or statistical abbreviations. So APA has a whole list of acceptable abbreviations that don't need to be defined anywhere in your writing. And that's why the APA style, or the APA manual rather, is really important to get. So again, if you still haven't purchased it, perhaps now you're realizing how useful that would be. So now I'm going to take you to the APA style guide that's linked here in the assignment. Again, it just kind of gives you some information, talking about clarity. There are no periods used with abbreviations in APA style. So we're going to go here to this definition of abbreviation. So this is again when you're kind of defining what that abbreviation means. So we don't want to overuse or underuse. Again, if you've abbreviated a term, you want to use it at least 3 more times in that paper. When the term first appears in the sentence, you're going to place the abbreviation in parentheses after it. So here is the term post-traumatic stress disorder. See how that is written out in the sentence. Perhaps you're saying research has found that individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder, and then you want to abbreviate that here in parentheses afterwards. And you're going to use this term now 3 more times in your writing. And then you would continue on with the sentence. This you probably wouldn't use too often necessarily, but this is often used where sometimes maybe you need to cite a scale. So you have this scale listed here, clinician administered PTSD scale for DSM-5, but you're going to use that 3 more times in your writing, so you want to abbreviate it within the parentheses. You also want to cite that scale. So you put both within the parentheses and you separate with a semicolon. This is another rule that we'll be learning this semester. If you're going to do it all in a parenthetical format, which very uncommon to use in writing style in this class, you would then put that abbreviation in square brackets. But if it's in a narrative format and this is within the writing of the sentence, you put the abbreviation and the citation all within parentheses and separate with that semicolon. Now, not every abbreviation obviously needs to be cited. Just like up here, PTSD did not need to be cited. Now, of course, there are some abbreviations that can be used without definition. Things that are just listed in the dictionary, IQ, different types of measurement, time abbreviations, Latin abbreviations. So here, kilograms, centimeters, don't need to be defined. Again, there is a whole list of approved APA style abbreviations in the APA manual. Hours and minutes, don't need to write those out, don't need to show those abbreviations, and it is preferred to use the abbreviations. HR for hour, MIN for minute, S for second. We'll get to Latin abbreviations here. There's a little bit more specifics to it. And then there's many statistical abbreviations that you don't need to define either. But notice how they are all italicized. That is another rule that we'll be learning this semester. So I'm going to take you back and we're going to now go to Latin abbreviations because this is a little bit more specific. And the one that students probably use the most is versus. So here you'll notice that these are all Latin abbreviations that you may or may not be familiar with. For example, etc., that is, and versus. Versus is probably the one that students use the most, as well as etc. This is what they mean. Now, for APA style, you only use these Latin abbreviations if what you're saying is in parentheses. If it's within the sentence, you have to write it out. So if you list an example within parentheses, you can say parentheses, for example, and list that. But if you're saying, for example, in your sentence, you would not use a Latin abbreviation. And again, this is probably most commonly misused with versus in your student writing. I see it very commonly. So again, this VS period would not be presented in a sentence. You would have to write out versus or against. You would put versus if you had something in parentheses, or if you're talking about a specific court case, you use the V instead. And I think that is all for our APA style rules for abbreviations.